So for those of you that have just signed in, hello and welcome to Advantu's Cost to Quality webinar presented by Charlie Gragg. And if you're interested in seeing a step-by-step process for measuring, then improving your organization's capability to design, build, and deliver quality products on a consistent basis, then this is how the pros do it. And before we get into the program, just a quick request. Since we have limited time, would everyone please turn off your email and and hide your cell phone? We promise you'll get the most out of this webinar without those distractions. Thank you very much. And also, as we get started, just so there's no noise distraction, if everybody could please mute yourself. That way it's easier to hear Charlie and there's no occasional echo that might come across the system. And last, I recommend to improve audio quality. If you have a headset or earpieces, if you're on your phone or on your laptop, plug in an earpiece. It'll make it'll improve the audio quality. It just makes for better listening. And if you have any questions before Charlie is finished, please send me a chat message within this program, and I'll make sure to get it to him. So here's what we're going to cover today. First, in case you're wondering who we are, I'm Chris Kelly, president of Advantu. We support pharmaceutical and biotech companies in the following ways. We provide FDA and regulatory support across R&D, manufacturing, and supply. We also provide process improvement for both quality and engineering teams. And last, we provide software QA and testing support for biotech and medical device companies. And as you see on the screen, today's gift, we want to thank everyone who's attended today's webinar. And as a way of saying thank you, we're going to gift you Charlie's cost of quality process explanation for R&D, manufacturing, and supplier quality. This is a wonderful write-up, so be sure to stick around to the end and I'll make sure we get it to you. Additionally, Charlie will cover all the important features of cost of quality and why it's so successful. Also, Charlie will review one real-world project success so you can see how it helped a fairly well-known company get through a problem they're experiencing. And at the end, we'll have our Q&A period so everyone's questions can be answered. Last, Charlie, as I mentioned, will review a couple of submitted challenges and share specifically which CoQ aspect would resolve each issue. So if you'd like to, again, send me your challenge during the webinar, send a message, chat message through this program, and I'll make sure he covers it at the end. And lastly, I will reveal a bonus item we're providing for everybody at the end of the webinar. So now it's time. Let's get started. I'd like to introduce Charlie Gragg. He's a quality process expert, and he's been leading process improvement projects for over 30 years. And 20 of those years, he's been supporting companies in the biopharma industry. We're lucky to have him. Here's Charlie.
Thanks, Chris. Hello, I'm Charlie Gragg, and glad to be with you today. As Chris mentioned, I've been in the business for a long time with roles in program management, process improvement, and quality development implementation since the early 80s. After retiring from the Navy, I was a quality advisor to the CIO of the IRS, much loved organization, I think, until I was hired away by Oracle as a quality manager and trainer. After constant traveling with Oracle, I got kind of tired of that and started my own company, Software Engineering Application Solutions, in 1997. I've been helping government and corporate clients with process improvement, systems development, and implementation. For the past number of years, I've been focused on providing quality and compliance process assistance to numerous medical device and pharma companies. Welcome to this cost of quality presentation. The purpose of this is to give you a flavor of both the needs and benefits of using cost of quality as a mechanism to drive continuous process improvement. Now a quick overview of what we'll be presenting today. But before that, ask yourself the following questions. Do you have a process improvement program currently? If you have a process improvement program, do you experience any of the situations listed on this slide? And take a couple minutes or 30 seconds or so to read these. If you answer yes to any of this, then a cost of quality process will likely be helpful in guiding you in both immediate and continuous process improvement. Now a quick overview of today's topics. We'll take a brief look at how cost of quality has evolved. Next, we'll discuss likely immediate and long-term benefits that you can receive. We'll show you at the 10,000-foot level actual benefits we provided a specific medical device company. Quality metrics have good characteristics, just like requirements have good characteristics. So we'll take a look at a few of the necessary characteristics of good quality metrics. Then we'll look at the quality activities you should measure and how you can measure them, providing you improve process with effectiveness checks. Think of CAPA. So this is a self-correcting mechanism that you can use. Putting it all together, we'll cover using cost of quality for targeted process improvement. To show you an order of magnitude of cost of poor quality, we'll look at actual costs associated with the support for a single CAPA investigation, and then actual costs for a medical device company over a 9-month period before they implemented cost of quality metrics. Finally, we'll look at what's next.
Hey, Charlie, you say evolution. Is cost of quality a new or proven process improvement technique?
Good question, Chris. Let's take a look at evolution. Formal process improvement really began in the 1800s with time and motion studies and continued to the 90s with Bill Crosby and his Do It Right the First Time, along with Watts Humphrey and Carnegie Mellon's initial capability maturity model and then capability maturity model for integration. These concepts provide much of the basis for the foundation of cost of quality. Executing good quality activities in a proactive and controlled manner and executing them right the first time will provide the building blocks of your cost of quality process improvement efforts. Just a quick side note to show you that initially approaching cost of quality does not need to be time-consuming or overarching. I was asked to help a furniture manufacturer in the 90s to speed up their order fulfillment process. So I asked them what the process was and determined that an incoming order was routed to 5 people for approval before the order was finally sent for filling. It turned out that only 2 of the people had any real approval responsibility for the order, so the order often just sat in the inboxes of the other 3. Taking the 3 non-required people out of the loop reduced the process by 3 days and resulted in much happier customers. And that was not an involved process that I went through. It was just a common sense look at what they had. And I've got several other examples that I could give you if you're interested. Have any of you ever experienced delays with document changes, document approvals, anything mundane like that? If you have, then maybe cost of quality is a good solution for you. Let's look at the benefits of implementing a cost of quality program for your organization. Beginning with a collaborative gap assessment, and we initially use gap assessments in almost every situation. We initially help clients identify possible process improvement areas. And again, this is in conjunction with you as a client. It's not something we come in and just throw on. It's a collaborative arrangement. And the list can come from many places. It can come from reviews of CAPAs, reviews of complaints, reviews of audits, design reviews, lessons learned, etc. The majority of this documentation you already have. It's just a matter of using it. Next, we determine the costs associated with the process. You'll be surprised at the actual costs that are incurred in this. Then together we look at the cost benefit and rank the improvements to help you build your initial roadmap. Again, these are all tailor-made to fit into your organization and address the things that are most important to you. After this, it becomes an ongoing process. You add, you modify, you delete possible improvement areas. It becomes a living roadmap, if you will. These cost of quality metrics lead to decreased time to market and increased customer satisfaction.
Charlie, how have you used cost of quality metrics to significantly improve a process?
Okay, glad you asked, Chris. Let's look at an actual medical device client who used and the cost of quality solution that we both arrived at. The first issue we looked at was new product delays. From the first root cause, we found that design control tools were not being validated quickly enough. There was a result of excessive validation times, which was a result of validation technician shortages, which was a result of too many tools being used for the same purpose. For example, there were 4 defect tracking tools, and they had, I think, 16 different development groups of people. And in all those 16 development groups, there was not a common tool set that they used. They had different defect tracking, different document management, different requirements management, different different tools altogether. So there was a vast mix of it. So what we did was we reduced the number of tools with common functionality. That took a little bit of time and effort because everybody has their own, personal favorites of all that. But through showing the cost and benefit analysis of using fewer tools, I think we got most people on board. Next, there was a result of multiple regression cycles. This was a result of missing design specifications that we had, which was a result of unimplemented requirements, which was a result of poor traceability. And the recommendation we came up with was to implement full traceability in the system. Client benefits realized from the tool reduction effort were reduced tool support costs, improved tool validation times, increased training effectiveness and reduced training costs because you had less thing to strain on, increased personnel effectiveness since team members could now easily rotate in and out of different development teams without having to learn new and different tools. Ended up with earlier design transfer and ultimately more satisfied customers. The benefits of the automated traceability were no dangling requirements or missing design elements after the implementation of the automated regression analysis by identifying and establishing links from user needs to requirements to risk mitigations to design to code to both verification and validation in their respective reports. Again, we had a decrease in development cycles, a corresponding decrease in development costs, and it's with the tool reduction, earlier design transfer, and ultimately increased customer satisfaction. Now let's look at what desirable metric characteristics are. And as I said earlier, the characteristics are very similar to the desirable characteristics of requirements. They need to be accurate. They need to be meaningful and measurable. If they don't drive a response activity or cannot be measured, then they're of little or no value. You're just wasting your time. They need to be understood and consistent across the organization. With one client a few years back, I helped to improve their CAPA metrics, and I, went around to the different groups within the organization. And one group considered the CAPA closed when the investigation was complete. Then they opened another CAPA for the corrective action. They closed it when the corrective action was complete and opened another CAPA for preventative action. In their management reviews, this group had many more CAPAs than other groups, but their closing times were considerably faster, which they considered a plus. Metrics need to be apples to apples and not apples to grapefruits. I questioned another group about why they were tracking a specific metric and what the benefit of tracking that metric provided. Their response was, we're required to have metrics and we can track it. So not a really good use of resources just to track something for tracking something. And again, you need to be able to take action on what you're tracking. Otherwise, it's kind of a worthless metric.
And Charlie, for those of us who have not used cost of quality metrics or are still very new to the process, how do we begin with small steps? I mean, this sounds like a big resource overhead. Can you explain the short and long-term justification of costs?
Sure. Let's start by identifying quality activities just looking at conformance and non-conformance activities, and determine if they are benefits, if the benefits have turned into costs, or if they're costs only. Let's look at conformance and non-conformance first. All conformance activities need to be done. You can look at design, processes, document, purchasing, processing, acceptance, labels, and records. And the first time they're done, they're conformance activities. And the first time they provide a benefit. When they have to be redone, they turn into non-conformance activities. So the first time you do them, it's a conformance activity. The next time you do them, it's a non-conformance activity. Looking at just totally non-conformance activities, you have CAPAs, regression activities, defect resolution, effectiveness checks, complaint handling. Remember, initial conformance activities are redone, they become non-conformance activities. Remember Philip Crosby, do it right the first time. Purely non-conformance activities are always a cost, and I'm sure all of us experience these. The question to ask is, do we experience them over and over? Now let's look at how we can identify your organization's most beneficial cost of quality metrics that you can use for process improvement. The areas listed are the easiest places to start identifying non-compliance activities, possibly needing process improvement. You can quickly aggregate these to get started in the right direction. Questions to ask yourself concerning your current processes? Are you repeating root cause investigations? Are there common failed effectiveness checks? Do you have repeat audit findings? Do you experience excessive recalls and rework? Is personal turnover an issue? Does your organization have common or costly customer complaints? Think about these for a few moments and we'll see if we can identify any of them. And if you don't have any of these things, then you have one really great quality system and I'd like to come and look at it. Let's look at non-compliance findings. They can include poor training, missing requirements, poor risk identification. You can also look at audit findings to try and get a handle on where you're going. Do you have incomplete traceability findings, documentation errors, requirements churn, or missing DHF items? As an example, let's look at needing to change or add a requirement, just one single requirement. The possible activity actions and actors associated with the cost depend upon when the missing or incorrect requirement is discovered. For example, the actions involved in driving to pick up ice cream depend upon a time and a place. For example, where are your keys? What's the weather? Where's the car parked? Do you need gas or if you don't need gas? So the required activities for that specific thing, picking up ice cream, depend upon your current environment. So the required actions to affect the requirements change depend upon where they start. As I said earlier, the possible actions depend upon when the missing or incorrect requirement is discovered. The earlier it is found, the less costly its resolution is. So the least costly is when it's found in the initial requirements analysis. The most costly is when it's found in time on market, when it's on market. So let's look at the costs associated with the same requirement change depending upon where it's found. First is to identify the possible action takers. And the action takers I'm showing you on the slide are just generic, they're just examples. So you're going to have clerical, you're going to have indirect labor, you're going to have workers, you're going to have managers, you're going to have vice presidents, you're going to have people of all different levels to do this. Now we look at the hourly rates. And again, just as with the generic rates, these are for example purposes only. Remember, different levels of employees are likely to participate in the various actions, and different employee levels cost different amounts. As an example, I was at the Patent and Trademark Office looking at delays that they had. And they had meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. They didn't do much action, but they had a lot of meetings. So in one meeting, we would have maybe 10 or 15 people, and that would go for 45 minutes to an hour. They would leave, we'd have another meeting consisting of maybe 50% the same people. You discuss the same thing, and this went on and on and on. If you start adding up the costs of these managers and people being in the meeting and not doing something more productive, it really does add up. So again, the activities will be different depending upon when the need for the change for the requirement is found. Let's look at the cost of finding the needed requirements. And we're going to go through the requirements analysis. We're going to go to design, coding, unit integration, verification, validation, and on market. The same requirements change. So if we find it in the requirements phase, we have $20 that we're going to spend. A quarter of an hour for the updating of the paperwork and a half hour for the requirements analysis. If the change is identified during the design, we have an additional $90 plus the cost of the SCR update and the requirements analysis. Now we're up to $110. Remember, the $90 is just the new added cost to this. Following, if the change is discovered in coding, we have the new cost of a code review plus the previous 3 activities. So now we're up to $177 for this requirements change. The change not identified until we're in unit testing, we now have the cost of the unit testing plus the previous activities, and we're up to $200. And if it's not found until we're in integration, the increase in cost is obvious. Now we're up to $213. If it's not found until verification, we now have a total cost of $228, again, for the same requirements change. Moving on, if it's found in validation, we're now up to $243 for a single requirements change. Now, that may seem big, but if it's not found until we're on market, we've added corrections and removals and root cause analysis. We're now up to $843 for this initial requirements change that if it was found in the requirements analysis phase would have been $20. So, and compare this $843 to $0 if the requirements didn't have to be changed in the first place. Let me say that again. $843 is just the cost associated with non-compliance activities of one requirement change when the product is on market. And it's a total cost. It's not a benefit at all. The initial compliance would only been $238. If you add that to the non-compliance efforts, it becomes quite a bit, a 454% increase to do that. So instead of the $843, we actually have $1,081 now. The cost actually presented only account for the activity of only the activity. It doesn't account for the cost of delay, the cost of possible recalls, or the costs associated with customer dissatisfaction.
Hey, Charlie, how many clients that you've interacted with over the last 20 years in the medical device and biotech world, what's the percentage you would say that if they had just implemented cost to quality metrics would have eliminated the majority of their time to market and over budget problems?
I would say almost every one. Even people who have, good process improvement, things could always improve. So, sometimes they get to a level and they say, okay, we're good enough, and they don't increase anymore. But again, the cost of quality metrics give you a living program. As times change, you become better at things and you become worse at things, depending upon the people mix and what you're doing. So I would say the vast majority of them. Again, that was the whole idea of coming up with CMM and CMMI and their 5 levels of things, where the last one was a self-actualization process of improvement. A lot of people don't do that. People are down in the middle and they're just kind of happy to go along. But if you can empirically show people that it really does cost them not only money but time to correct errors, it's much cheaper not to have the errors in the first place. Make sense?
Oh, it's crystal clear. It's pretty obvious to me.
Okay.
This is fun to watch.
Shown on this slide, you can see the progressive cost increase for correcting just, again, the single requirement change we just went through, depending upon when the change was found. Hopefully this gives you an appreciation for the increased cumulative costs associated with resolving issues later rather than earlier, but how the cost of quality metrics can help you effectively guide in your continuous improvement activities, whether you pick doing it in the requirements phase or whether the design phase. Maybe you want to increase your code reviews, but boy, when you get to the on market, you're really hurting yourself by doing this. Here's another example or another display of how the costs improve. So for compliance only, I know $238. When you get all the way down here, the same thing is again 454% more at $1,081. And again, this was only for one requirements change. How many of you have multiple requirements change at different levels? How many of you get through into verification and say, oh, shoot, we didn't code this part, and then we're going to go back and do it. So you got to go all the way back, sometimes to the user needs, and then the requirements and the mitigations and all that. You got to redo that stuff again. The other downside of having to do that is people become burnt out if you repeat the same thing over and over and over again.
And Charlie, can you appreciate that?
Yeah, go ahead.
That was a great presentation. Can you give a quick recap and possibly show cost activity for an actual improvement?
Sure. Let's recap first. You identify the areas you want to target for improvement. These areas are prioritized based upon your unique cost-benefit analysis on something specific to your organization or your group within the organization. You measure and calculate the cost over a given time frame. You plan your selected improvements beginning with your initial high priority and high value items. You begin to see cost reductions along with reductions in time to market and increased customer satisfaction, which I think is the ultimate goal of most things, is to get to market faster and have increased customer satisfaction, which then in turn gets you more customers. Then you revise your metrics as necessary. Again, it's a living way of processing improvements. You've now started with this living continuous improvement plan, and its implementation is based upon actual empirical results, not I think this or this may be or whatever. You have hard numbers and facts and figures to show people. And your metrics adapt over time in response to your changing needs. Now, you asked for a real-world example. Let's look at actual recorded costs incurred for the support of a single CAPA investigation. Again, this is a single CAPA investigation. You can look at the description of things that are happening over here, the number of actors, the average cost, the activity hours, and the sub-activity costs, along with the activity cost of $5,500, again, for a single CAPA support investigator, support of a single CAPA investigation. These are actual numbers from a specific client. So how does this compare with one of your CAPA investigations? And how many CAPAs do you have throughout a product's life? Remember, this only shows the costs associated with supporting one investigation at one time. Okay, now we have a busy chart that's going to be hard to see. At the bottom of the right-hand corner is the cost of good quality. If we had just done good quality for this 9-month period, it would have been $516,920. If we add in the bad quality, you increase it by $448,020. So good quality $516, bad quality $548, which gives you almost $1 million in cost, and half of that is just being bad stuff that you don't really want. Hopefully the presentation is giving you an expanded understanding of cost of quality and how its metrics can be used to help you identify and prioritize and guide your continuous process improvement. Let me ask you, what is your plan to speed up your time to market and increase your customer satisfaction?
Thank you very much, Charlie. That was a great presentation. I've been doing software testing as a career since 1998. And I got into the medical device world around 2004. I was doing project work for Pyxis. And then I transitioned over to CareFusion years later for projects working with medical devices like infusion pumps and things like that. And I started to see a lot of delayed projects, and I saw a lot of cost overruns. I used to sit and chat with the director that was in charge, and he would show me how much we just spent because someone made a mistake. And then he showed me the list of all the mistakes that had occurred over the last few years. And he said, by the way, this is kind of normal in this industry. And I was blown away. And I thought maybe it was because it's a highly regulated industry, but it just turned out that most of it was caused by people rushing to meet deadlines. And then there's the one step forward, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps back. And I think that if these folks and these teams had seen something like cost of quality and seen how important it was to get it done correctly the first time, and then having this process to be a roadmap for them to show them how to do it, how to prioritize, where the risks are, and how to focus their time on it, I think it would have been a huge improvement. And I know that Charlie, I know you've seen this with the companies. You've implemented this process for companies like Baxter and Medtronics and others. And so I wanted to ask a couple of folks. I know Deepak's out there, Martina, Tom. Deepak, what's one example of a challenge you've seen over the, you've had a long career, you do a lot of this high-end work yourself. What's one of the challenges that you've seen that you think a program like this would have been helpful for?
I think it would be very helpful in compliance. So non-compliance would be definitely a big piece. It could be based on any factor. I mean, in my understanding, what we discussed now was more on the software front, but this could be extrapolated to any activity of non-compliance.
Absolutely. And Martina, do you have anything you wanted to add to that, or Tom? Oh, they're not dialed in. They're just watching. What I'd like to do is some folks sent me some questions of their challenges, and one of them was, how do I improve communication across the organization so there's better harmonization between manufacturing and R&D? How would you utilize cost of quality to help improve that for them, Charlie?
Going back to where I was talking about apples to apples instead of apples to grapefruit. One method that I've seen very beneficial, and I use it in doing this, and I use it in teaching also, are visuals. You give process flows. words tend to mean different things to different people, where pictures are much easier to understand. So if you put pictures up there, it's easier. For example, I was working with a company back in Washington, D.C. a long time ago doing a system engineering thing. And I put up, I asked them what their process flow was for defect tracking, just defect tracking. And I put it up on a board. I mean, this was a big board, all the different inputs and outputs that you have and who's responsible for it. I happened to use swim lanes at that time. And people would come up and say, well, I don't really do that. I do this, or I don't get that. I get this and I give this. And so, over the iterative process, we made this process flow accurate to the way people understood it, and it made it much better because people knew what they were getting, what they were giving, and what they were actually doing. So I would use visuals as much as you can to get people on the same page.
That's awesome. And I see, Tom, you're connected. Did you have anything that you've run into in your career that you think this process would have been helpful?
Well, the challenge, I think this is not in some sense new news, but what you have is just the desire to implement. And so I guess my question would be is how to influence the management to make this happen.
You show them actual numbers. That's why we go through the actual cost of quality metrics to say, for example, the support for a CAPA investigation was $5,500. People tend not to realize how much things cost them to do over and over again, versus if they could just do it the first pass through and get through quicker and get to market quicker. I mean, you show them actual numbers rather than, well, I think this or I think that or this might happen to do that. And you pick something that's really going to be of benefit to you. Again, whether it's approving documents, whether it's putting out changes, whether it's going through one pass for verification and one pass for validation, or whether it's increasing your forced article inspection success in manufacturing. Show them hard facts and not just things that you think, but show them actual results.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
And again, it could be used for more than software. I use this at Zimmer in their manufacturing of knee parts and hip parts. We use it for incoming inspections. We use it for supplier certifications. So you can use it for a number of things. It's not just strictly done for software, although most of my experience is in software development or manufacturing.
And what was your question, Tom?
Well, I was just saying that money is the language of management, so that was a really good answer.
Yep.
That's awesome. And I had one more challenge. They asked, how do I get better utilization of our quality processes, including our QMS, across the organization so we're more effective as a whole?
Again, go back to laying out your processes and aligning all your processes and procedures. Going back to the example when I was helping the company with their CAPAs, they all had different understandings of how the CAPA was used and what the purpose of the CAPA was. You put everybody on a common ground. You can look at that in manufacturing facilities. Say you have 5 manufacturing facilities all manufacturing the same thing. I guarantee you that all their processes are not going to be the same. And you look and see what works best, and you get people on board to say, if you do it this way, we're gonna save money, and people are going to be better off. So you can look at consistency in what you're doing.
Awesome, thanks, Charlie. And before we get into the next phase, because we're almost done, Deepak and Tom, since you're dialed in, did you guys have any other questions for Charlie regarding what you just saw?
Not at the moment. This seems pretty good. Thank you.
None for me either.
Okay, because I mentioned earlier the gift we're going to send out, so I'll get that in the mail today. And regarding the bonus item, obviously you folks, I wanted to ask you, did you enjoy Charlie's presentation?
Yeah, very polished. Thank you.
Oh, good. And so did you folks see how this program could really help solve your company's critical challenges? Because the good news is Charlie is available for private consultation. and we can discuss your challenges in more detail and determine the best solution together. Now, of course, until we get more details, I can't promise anything, but Charlie's track record is pretty amazing, and I'm confident he can help resolve challenges that folks are dealing with. So for those that would be interested in having a private consultation about any challenges or issues that they're dealing with at their company, we'd be happy to schedule a call. It's a free call, and walk through it and see if it's a good fit. So for those who are interested in discussing a private consultation, please send me an email and we'll go ahead and schedule that for you. And with that, I think we're done. And Charlie, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, just to reiterate that this can be as small or as large as you want. You can start with one thing and go from that. It's not you don't have to eat an elephant and implement an entire ERP system. You can do one process at a time, and you pick the one that's going to give you the most value. And you start out small and you build. You can't build the whole thing at once.
Awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate everybody's time. I think we finished when we said we would. And if no one else has any questions, I think that's it for the day. And I will shoot out the gift that we promised. And again, if anyone wants to set up a free private consultation with Charlie, go ahead and respond to the email that I send out to you. And thanks again for dialing in, and looking forward to seeing you folks at our next webinar.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
You're very welcome. Thanks, everybody, for showing up, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. All right. Bye, everybody.